Okay there, Penn State fans. It's Auburn week. I'm Bob Flounders, joined by Johnny McGonigal, talking about the number 22 Penn State Nittany Lions back in the top 25, going to Jordan-Hare Stadium Saturday, 3:30 kickoff on CBS. Johnny, I hope you're doing well. I know you're feeling good after your Eagles won. I got to tell you, as a Cowboys fan growing up, and I grew up a Cornhuskers fan, it's never been a better time to be a fan of both. It was a banner weekend for my Cowboys and my Cornhuskers. I'm really, really excited about the future of both teams. But I wanted to ask you, that was your triumphant return to Beaver Stadium. You hadn't been there in a little while. That was your first home game in a while. I know you had covered Penn State before, but what did it feel like?
Yeah, Bob, before I got overly excited about the Eagles beating the Lions, I ended up seeing a different set of Lions on Saturday at Beaver Stadium and was really excited to be back. I mean, that first touchdown run by Nick Singleton, the 70-yarder down the Penn State sideline, shook the press box. And I'm like, I remember that feeling. I remember how that felt. And so it was a neat experience to be back and just be in State College and be around game day, seeing the tailgates and the RVs, and it felt very familiar, having gone to Penn State and covered them then. And so very familiar, very cool. And it was just good to have football season back. I mean, the Purdue atmosphere the week before was a really good one too. And now we get to go down to Auburn. And so three games in a row here with good environments and good atmospheres. Yeah.
And you knew exactly what to do. You made sure you got to the press box early, avoided the traffic snarls that, I would say by like 10 or 10:30, or maybe even like 9 or 9:30, even if you were close by, you couldn't get to the stadium. It took you like an hour wait, but you were there early. You knew exactly. It was a pro move.
I was early and I got locked out for a hot minute. So I went down to the concourse level to get a overhead view of the team arrival and the blue band and all that coming in. And then as I tried to get back up to the press box, I had gone through what I didn't know at the time was an authorized personnel only door going out to the concourse. And so I tried to go back in and I'm like, okay, well, I have a credential. Like, I should be authorized personnel, right? And then there's a swipe card. So Audrey Snyder, the Athletic, a good friend of ours, came down and helped me back in through the door. Thank God. But yeah, so a little adventure to even be, start before the home opener.
Yep, Penn State fans. I think on Twitter there's some photographic evidence of Johnny and John Sauber of the Center Daily Times being trapped behind a fence before Audrey rescued them. Thank God you made it out of there alive. I don't know what you got to do, Johnny, to be authorized personnel. You only went to Penn State. You've covered Penn State before. I think if anyone should be authorized, it should be you. But you're here now. We're going to talk about Penn State Auburn. James Franklin had his news conference around lunchtime today. I was up there. You were listening in. He touched on a variety of subjects. I feel like it's our moral obligation to Penn State fans to start every podcast on Tuesday with some kind of Drew Allar update, because he's the talk of the town, as good as Nick Singleton was, Big Ten true freshman of the week after running for 179 yards on only 10 carries. I mean, when I came home and I was out and about on Sunday and Monday, man, they only want to talk about number 15. So I think James was asked a couple different questions about Drew. And what did you take away from that?
Yeah, I think the one thing that James Franklin said that really resonated with me, and I think everyone who was tuning into that press conference, was him saying that it looks like things have slowed down, Drew Allar, and that at this stage in his college career already, 2 games in as a true freshman, that he looks comfortable out there and he looks poised. And that was the one big thing that I took away from that Ohio win. It's nice to win by 36, and it's nice to get a boatload of freshmen in, and especially Drew going out there and completing 6 of 8 passes for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, those numbers are really nice, but what stood out to me is just how comfortable he looked and how effortless it looked to me. His 32-yard touchdown to Omari Evans down the seam, that thing was just a little flick of the wrist. Like other quarterbacks in the, not just at Ohio, but at in the Big Ten would have to step into a throw like that, and it looks so easy to Drew. And I think that's really what stands out. His arm strength already is just kind of off the charts. He had a Matt Stafford, Patrick Mahomes sidearm throw as well.
Yeah,
he was showing off all the tools on Saturday, and James Franklin's comments reflected that.
Yeah, and he all but said he is the number 2 guy. He almost has to be, or else there would be mass hysteria among the Penn State alumni base. But yeah, he is the number 2 guy, with number 2 with a bullet, I would add at this point, because he certainly has looked every bit of the part of somebody who is ready for any situation. He was asked, Johnny, later in his news conference about dealing with roster management and also depth charts and keeping people happy and seeing movement. In the age of the immediate transfer portal, you just can't please everyone. You can urge people to be patient, and he's got I would imagine the amount of meetings and whether it's with parents or unhappy players or players that think they should be playing more, that's just a constant hourly battle, I would think, for just about every major college program. And he was kind of asked about that specifically, I think, with Drew and Christian Veilleur. And, they also have Bo Prabula, who's a true freshman. And I wrote the comment down, and, he always gives a pretty well thought out answer. But I'm kind of paraphrase. He says, at the end of the day, you just have to manage your team and your people appropriately. And that is really the name of the game. When you have 4 pretty good quarterbacks on your roster, they're not all going to be happy with where they sit. But, I think they've made a very conscious effort, Johnny, when they've seen Drew make some big strides this offseason, whether it was in spring or in August practice. They've made a conscious effort to rep him appropriately. And if they get a chance to play him, early in games, they're going to do it, and they might even do it against Auburn.
Yeah, and James even said after the game against Ohio that they wanted to get Drew in even earlier than he did because he made his Beaver Stadium debut in the third quarter. They wanted to get him a drive in the second. And so, yeah, you have to – it's a fine line with the quarterback specifically, with the way the portal is right now. I believe in that question even there was a name drop of Will Levis, right?
It was a Will Levis reference.
Obviously Will Levis was not the recruit that Drew Allar was or is, and in terms of that pedigree. But we see what Levis is doing right now at Kentucky. He's loved by every NFL scout out there and could be a first-round quarterback in a year's time. And so you don't want that to happen in your program. In an ideal world, you don't want a quarterback to leave and then succeed in that way elsewhere, right? You want to be able to keep all your guys within the program if possible. And a lot of that is placating, and please, really pleasing guys, and especially a guy like a Drew Allar. You want to be able to get him in early, and not just for the portal aspect of it or the hey, he's a 5-star guy. I mean, you want to develop this kid, and so far he's shown really good stuff. And so I think they're in a really good spot with that. And I think the way that they were able to get up early against Ohio and get him a lot of reps, I think is a good deal.
Yeah. Remains to be seen how maybe Mr. Veilleur and even Mr. Prabula feel about this at the end of the season. But you know what? They're going to do what's best for them, and Penn State's going to have to do what's best for the Lions. And what's best for Penn State, I think, not only in the present but the future, is getting Drew ready to play, because he's one snap, one injury away, and I think it's pretty clear he's gained a lot of ground on Sean Clifford since the start of August practices. So we'll see how it plays out. But Johnny, let's talk a little bit about what James had to say about prepping just for going to Jordan-Hare Stadium. It's a great atmosphere down there, SEC country. I think it holds about 85,000 people. Their team is 2-0. They played Penn State tough last year, lost 28-20. They have a great running game. They have like 3 good running backs. They actually have a running quarterback that Penn State's going to have to worry about that doesn't start. And they have a really athletic defense. It should be quite an environment. James talked a little bit about some of the challenges about getting Penn State ready for this. And he even referenced, Johnny, something about they started to do it a little bit on the practice field last week.
Yeah, no, I mean, the one thing that's kind of stood out to me with what James Franklin said about the environment at Jordan-Hare Stadium is the noise and the snap count is the big thing. Like last week, they were really repping snap count, and with a lot, he said with music as loud as possible, even though they were readying for a home game at Beaver Stadium, friendly confines. And James Franklin said that players and even coaches were a little confused at the time, like, hey, why are we doing this, right? Like, we're about to go play at home. And he didn't expressly say that at the time, but it was really to start preparing for Jordan-Hare Stadium and the atmosphere that they're going to be facing down at Auburn, which they're doing an orange out. So basically their response to the white out, they're encouraging all their fans to wear orange. And on Monday, Auburn star Derek Hall said that, he thinks that the orange out will be better than the white out. And interestingly, there was a little side comment within James Franklin's address talking about the atmosphere and everything, and he said, quote unquote, it's going to be a challenge. And we've listened to all their press conferences and listened to all those kind of things. So I think that's a part of that, right? So could be a little, I don't know, a little something going on there. But Penn State's going to be ready, for this environment. They've played at the Big House. They've played at, Ohio Stadium at the Shoe. And Georgia Stadium is going to be rocking, regardless of what color those fans are wearing. It's going to be a loud and raucous environment, and it helps that you have Sean Clifford, a 6-year senior, being the guy that leads your offense down there and has a cool head, hopefully for him. But again, you got to be ready if Drew Allar is going to be thrust into action. There, we saw backup quarterbacks at Iowa last year didn't fare so well. So they're preparing for everything.
Didn't fare so well is putting it very, very mildly. But it's the Blue White Breakdown podcast. Johnny McGonigal and Bob Flounders talking about a huge game for Penn State. Really, Johnny, to come out of their first 3 games 3-0 would be quite an accomplishment, given that 2 tough teams on the road are on the schedule. Purdue they were life and death to win that one. It didn't look good. Late into the fourth quarter, they found a way. They hammered Ohio like everyone thought they would. So now Penn State is now a slight favorite, around a 3-point favorite for this game. Auburn really hasn't played anyone. Mercer and I think San Jose State. They struggled a little bit with San Jose State at home last week. But I wanted to ask you, because every Sunday, PennLive's going to have a story about how you put together your top 25 ballot for the AP. You have a vote, and I know you take it very seriously. You go into a lot of detail. Penn State came out of it ranked number 22 after being unranked for the first 2 weeks. Where did you slot them? I know you referenced it in your story, but for the listeners and the viewers now that didn't get a chance to look at it, where did you slot them? And what do you think a Penn State win might do for them, maybe making an even bigger move this weekend?
Yeah, so I had Penn State slightly ahead of that 22. I had them at 20. And a part of that is because I had Penn State 22 in my preseason ballot, and I had them sticking at 22 after the Purdue win as well. A lot of that is, in terms of what goes into this ballot, a lot of it is what happens ahead of these teams. Like, all right, a couple teams lost, a few teams lost. You start sliding and moving and stuff. And I like to every week just take a look at it at like a blank slate, kind of like the College Football Playoff Committee is supposed to do it. I don't know if they actually do it that way, but I try to do that. And then, wherever the chips fall, that's how it happens. But I had Penn State at 20, and I think a win at Auburn, I mean, you could be pushing into the, around the top 15, because there have only been so many like high profile games this season so far. We're only, we're about to enter the, 3rd week here, and a win at Auburn, especially, it depends on how it happens. I mean, if it's a convincing win, then you could see them take a major jump up in the AP poll, and even in the coaches poll. But even a narrow win, sitting there at 3-0, going into a game against then Central Michigan and Northwestern, you could really see at the end of the line there, at the end of 5 games, going into the week being a fringe top 12, top 15 team.
Yeah, a lot. It's all in front of Penn State. After you win at Purdue. You've gotten 2 weeks to get some of your young players up to speed. The guys that needed the reps have gotten them. They suddenly start to look a little bit deeper, a little bit more dangerous, and it's really fascinating. And you referenced it a little bit with the Iowa comment and the backup quarterback, but that killed them. That killed them last year. They were never the same team after that 5-0 start. Well, now they have 3 quarterbacks. If they need to play them. They have 3 quarterbacks that I think they feel really, really good with, in Clifford, Allar, and obviously Vayor. So it's a much different situation. I wanted to get to 2 positions with you where he commented on. Let's start, though, with maybe a guy that's made the biggest strides since last December. Maybe the biggest strides since last December. Olu Fashanu, the left tackle, has played extremely well. He's now had 3 career starts. His first one came against Arkansas in the Outback Bowl. I thought he did a pretty good job in that game, and he has just kind of raised his level. He was great against Purdue. I don't know how much you really want to evaluate him based upon what Ohio had because they weren't very big. But, man, in terms of just pass protection, his strength, James referenced it. He said his play strength is exceptional. And he also said, he's able to recover when he's beaten initially. And there have been some Penn State tackles that have been pretty good that have not been able to do that. But this guy looks like, knock on wood, they've been dinging Penn State's offensive line for a while, and there's still some issues. But, Johnny, I think Penn State and the coaching staff and the fan base should be really excited about their left tackle.
Yeah, I think he looks the real deal. I mean, against Purdue, I think Pro Football Focus had him down for 0 pressures allowed, which made sense. I mean, if you just went back and watched the tape and look at his reps, I mean, he was really impressive. And again, not to besmirch the right side of the line, but when there's guys coming through and pressuring Clifford and Allar from the right side, it makes the left side look even better. And what Olu Fashanu has been able to do on the left side has been really significant. And I think Wormley as well has played all right. I think Scruggs at center has played fine. I think otherwise, there are some issues at that right tackle spot, but in terms of what you want out of your left tackle, protecting the blind side of your quarterback, Olu Fashanu has done a really nice job, and it's a good, Purdue, again, they didn't have George Karlaftis. They don't have the front that Auburn has, and I think I'm really looking forward to seeing how Olu does against this front 7 of Auburn, because they got a lot of experience, a lot of speed, a lot of power.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Wormley, because as great as Singleton was on that 70-yard touchdown run, Wormley got out there and had a really nice clearing block to get him in the open, and he showed some really good movement skills for – he's a big guy. I thought he had a really nice block on that play.
It was a nice pull, yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying it was a really nice pull, the way he was able to get out in space like that.
Yeah, and it was usually guys that size aren't necessarily able to do that, but he was out in front of a very fast running back, and that's not necessarily easy to do. We saw Bryce Effner play tight end and offensive tackle again against Ohio. I guess he's an insurance policy for right tackle, but Auburn has athletes all along their defense, whether it's the front, whether it's the linebackers, whether it's the secondary. And Penn State has not faced a group as athletic as Auburn, so we'll see how we'll see how all those guys are able to do and how they're able to protect Penn State's quarterbacks in open holes, because this Auburn defense, I think, is really, really a tough one. But, Johnny, they did have some issues in pass defense against San Jose State. And Penn State's athletes they have at the skill positions, whether it's tight end, whether it's wide out, or even the running backs as receivers, they can do some damage. So I think I'm pretty fascinated to see that. And James was asked about the wideout group in its entirety. He was also asked specifically about true freshman Amari Evans, who did some nice things against Ohio. Granted, this is Auburn, but their ability, and you asked him about it. I think you asked him about it. Yards after the catch, I think they've got a ton of them through 2 games. It's not a coincidence. And there's been times where Sean actually hasn't hit receivers in stride, but the more accurate he can be, these guys are really, really dangerous. If he can hit them in stride, they're really tough to track down.
Yeah, I mean, Sean Clifford said after the game against Ohio that it's really nice when you can throw a little drag route to Parker Washington and he can take it 35, 40 yards. And that's a really important part of this offense, whether it's Parker and his ability to get to the sideline and tiptoe his way to 5, 6, 7 more yards, or Mitchell Tinsley, the transfer over from Western Kentucky, has done a really nice job in that area as well. Keandre Lambert-Smith, a couple of drops there in the Purdue game, but he also had that run after the catch for the touchdown, and it was a big play in that game. So I watched the San Jose State, Auburn game earlier this morning, Bob, and what I saw from San Jose State's wideouts, they were just basically running simple slants, simple drags, getting open over the middle of the field and really taking advantage of those Auburn corners. Roger McCreary is not there in that secondary for Auburn, and he's in the NFL now for good reason. But they can be had, and so guys like Parker Washington and Mitchell Tinsley, even younger guys like Amari Evans or Harrison Wallace, I think we'll have some serious opportunities here. And again, if that front four is really pressuring Penn State's offensive line, and if they're getting pushed back, look for those short passes, those drag routes, those slants to really catch and go and create some explosive plays for this Penn State offense.
Yeah, and in last year's game, it was 28-20. It was it was a back and forth game the whole time. Tank Bigsby ran for 100 yards with 2 touchdowns. Jarquez Hunter did a lot of damage on 9 carries. He had 60 yards. If Auburn had a better quarterback than Bo Nix, I think Penn State might not have won that game. They have a different quarterback this year in TJ Finley, but it's really that running game that Auburn has that can just make it so difficult because Bigsby is one of the very best pure runners in the nation. Like, you put him on a team that's got a passing game and he doesn't get, doesn't see 8 or 9 guys in the box, and he's going to run for 1,800 yards. But Auburn is not there yet, Johnny, in the passing game. But even last year, they were able to really hurt Penn State just running the ball, lining it up, and they'd make a lot of those running backs can get yards after initial contact. Bigsby's a strong guy. Hunter's a good guy. I'm really curious to see how Manny Diaz is going to try and scheme up this Auburn running game, especially because Penn State has some talent on the defensive line, but I still think there's some pretty significant question marks at linebacker. So I wonder how Manny's going to try and scheme them up.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a little bit more 4-3 than you have, especially against Purdue, where they were going a lot of nickel and relying on that secondary. Aiden O'Connell had 60 passing attempts for Purdue, and Ohio last week had 40 passing attempts out of necessity. I'd be surprised if you get 25 passing attempts from Auburn. TJ Finley, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions through 2 games. And again, those are 2 games against Mercer, which is an FCS team, and San Jose State from the Mountain West. Not to besmirch the group of 5, but not necessarily the best competition. And they came out that second half against San Jose State and said, all right, we're just going to run Tank Bigsby into the ground here. And really this group of backs, 3 of them. And so I think it's really going to come down to guys like Curtis Jacobs, PJ Mustipher, Adisa Isaac, he's working back to 100%, and Tyler Elston, who didn't play, had a thing. It was just special teams reps against Auburn last year. Kobe King didn't play. These guys. Abdul Carter was is a true freshman. He was in high school this time last year against Auburn. So I think these guys who are it's an inexperienced group. I think if you're able to get help along that front 4 with Mustipher and those guys, if you can plug some holes in the running game, I think they'll be all right. But this is really the first test of Penn State's linebackers and really the depth of the linebackers.
Absolutely. Let's get to one more thing here on the Blue White Breakdown podcast. In last year's game, Penn State got contributions, major contributions from all 3 of their tight ends that are the top 3 this year. Theo Johnson had a 37-yard catch. Brenton Strange had 4 catches for 71 yards and a touchdown. And actually, they used Tyler Warren. I think it was a wildcat. He scored on a short run in that game. They've only really had 2/3 of the 3 amigos through the first 2 games. Theo Johnson has not been healthy enough to play. I have to imagine that James Franklin said he thought he was close and they were hopeful against Purdue. I think they knew they didn't need him against Ohio. I'm curious to see if Theo is 100% for this game, and if he is, you were talking about what you saw from Auburn secondary in the San Jose State game. They're going to have a tough enough time just with Penn State's wideouts, but if they have their full complement of tight ends, especially as receivers, it could really be if Clifford and or Drew have time to throw, they could really make life really, really difficult for this secondary, I think.
Yeah, and even in the short passing game, too, with the tight ends, you got athleticism with a Theo Johnson if he's able to play, Brenton Strange and Tyler Warren as well, bringing that to the table. And if you have to get the ball out quick, even getting it down, little stick route to your tight end, let him turn, break a tackle, and you can go for 8, 9, 10 yards. That happened a couple of times for San Jose State in the game against Auburn, where they were moving the chains. They were very methodical with their drives. A lot of like 8, 9, 10 play drives down into deep into Auburn territory, and I think that's how Penn State is going to have to win this game, is to really pick apart this Auburn defense play by play, and the tight ends will be huge, not just in the passing game, but in the running game too. Because if you're getting pressure and if you're getting tackles for loss and chaos in the backfield from Auburn's front seven, the tight ends are going to need to step up and block.
Yep, agree. Anything else from you? Any other takeaways from James's presser? It was a little short, a little over 30 minutes, but he was asked some interesting questions. I'm curious to see Nick Singleton, go against these guys, this defense. I'm curious to see Clifford, maybe Allar go against these guys. But I think most of all, the thing I'm most curious to see is Penn State's defense try and defend this running game. They don't. I mean, I want to say that they don't maybe have the same amount of fears about the passing game, because it's still a work in progress for Auburn. But that running game, even if Penn State has it schemed up pretty good, Bigsby and Hunter are so good that if you miss, James said it, if you miss on one of these guys, it's going to be 40 or 50 yards minimum. And it's just it's one of those things that I think Auburn knows that it might not work. But as the game goes on, if they get loose 2 or 3 times, it could be enough to turn the game.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see if Penn State takes a lead, say a 10-0 lead or 13-7 or something, and it starts to get late. Does Auburn go away from its running game, or does it really stick with it? I think they should stick with it, because TJ Finley has not impressed me through 2 games at Auburn. But if they start to really push it and open things up a little bit, there's an opportunity for Joey Porter Jr., Daquan Hardy, Jair Brown, that secondary to do what it does best, and to potentially take the ball away. They haven't had an interception this year yet, have they? I don't think they have.
Who's that?
Penn State.
Yeah, they have not. They've had Joey Porter fell on a fumble.
Right.
I think that was their lone turnover at Purdue, and it was, even though they hammered Ohio pretty good. It's weird that they don't have an interception, because they have all these pass breakups, right? Porter dropped a pick 6 against Purdue, but I have to think it's only a matter of time. And if this Auburn passing game, if Finley's off just a little bit, I think Jair would be a guy. Joey Porter would be a guy. Kalen King's played very well. Another player that's played really well, for Penn State is why am I blanking on him? The safety number 2 for Penn State, Keaton Ellis. He has played very, very well. All their safeties have played good. But, he kind of gets lost in the shuffle, because everyone wants to talk about Jalen Reed, and Zakee Wheatley, and Jair Brown is a premium player. But I think Ellis has been very, very good. So I think you're right. I think with all these pass breakups and this aggressive pass coverage, they're probably going to get flagged a couple of times, but I do think they're going to get their hands on 1 or 2 passes against Auburn.
Another thing, too, Penn State only has 8 tackles for loss so far this season. That's not enough. That's second fewest in the Big Ten. And so if you're able to, bring down, Bigsby, or even Finley, if he gets outside the pocket and tries to run, if you bring him down for a 3, 4, 5 yard loss, if you're putting an Auburn offense like that behind the sticks like that, I think that's, puts them in a really tough spot. They're not an offense that can, just chuck it downfield and move the chains like that. They really need to get forward progress almost every play.
Johnny, I'm with you. Congratulations to your Philadelphia Eagles. You cannot congratulate me on my Dallas Cowboys, because that was brutal. But you know what? We got a great Penn State Auburn game to go see this Saturday, 3:30, Jordan-Hare Stadium. I know we're both looking forward to it. David Jones, Joe Hermet are also expected to be along for that ride. Don't forget, I'll be with Dave for a podcast later in the week on the Blue White Breakdown, and Johnny and Dustin Hockensmith are going to have some thoughts later in the week as well. Johnny, this is one of the games of all the games Penn State's played in recent years on the road, because it's an exciting venue and because I've never been to Jordan-Hare. I could not be more excited about making this trip. I know you feel the same way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I got to go to an SEC stadium last year with Pitt playing at Tennessee. Now I get to go to Auburn, and let's just keep this train rolling, right? Just I'm very much looking forward to the atmosphere, the environment. Looking forward to being down there with you guys.
All right, Penn State fans. Johnny and I will be back next Tuesday, but in between, we're going to have a lot of great coverage on Penn State at Auburn as Penn State looks to move to 3-0.